I don't know how I'm gonna do this. I've become the mask. That is all that I am now. I need to do the whole stream like that. Well, I can't see anything. Today on the show, what we're going to be covering is we're going to go over some of the lore of this channel. More of the story has been told, so we're going to watch that first. That's going to explain why I'm back here. If you guys can see where we've left the sort of fortress of solitude and we're in the real world. Lots happening. We're going to be going over some political topics that I'm hoping will actually help people. Rather than just discussing events that are happening, I hope that this gives people something to kind of consider. Let's start with the lore. Where we last left off, myself and the robot figure both found themselves in a video game, and we discovered that the robot figure was actually me from the future, who had, I guess, gone back in time in order to prepare me. We were both sort of working as a team to complete this level. Now it's where we are from there. What is this?
This is the reality model between timelines. We're almost there.
No, check this out though. Like, we're in some kind of limbo. This is a stasis. Man, how does something like this even exist?
I don't have as much time as you. I don't want to get trapped. We need to keep going.
What are you afraid of? That we'll lose some computer game?
Jim, you have no idea what loss is.
Is that what's wrong with you?
What?
Yeah, what's wrong with you? You're mostly broken.
What's wrong with me is that you weren't ready. You ignored all the signs and warnings because you wanted to goof around and have fun. When the time came to get serious, you were useless. Worse, you were a liability.
Maybe that's better than whatever it is that you are. You're so out of touch I can hardly even understand what you're saying half the time with your stupid robot voice. You think you're better at this just because you're older than me. I got us through this level just as far as you did. And maybe if you remembered how to do things my way, you wouldn't be such a broken mess. So don't blame this on me.
You're the problem.
Yeah.
Look, I'm not trying to belittle you, but I come from a different time, a different world. One that you don't seem to understand. Unfortunately, before long, you're going to be forced to. I want you to have more to work with than I did. I know I'm almost obsolete, but my role isn't finished yet.
I don't think you're almost obsolete. I just think you should enjoy however much time we have. I mean, look at this. Like, I've never seen anything like this before. And you seem to know everything about me, and I hardly know anything about you, even though somehow we're still the same person.
You ashamed of me? Of what you became?
I don't know. It's just not what I was expecting. You ashamed of me?
I resented you for years, not because you weren't prepared. There would have been no way for you to have been ready. But you were at least able to enjoy life in a way that I can't anymore. And people always compared me to you. It was obvious how much they all loved you more before I became this. They love you because you care. But as soon as you cared enough to try and address any problems, that all changed. Everyone turns on anyone who knows how the problem is fixed. They don't want them around. They hate them. They're obsolete. And then things get really bad.
We should finish merging the timeline before we get trapped in here.
You sure?
Yes.
You ready?
No.
This is as close as it gets. Let's go.
Do not wake up.
Well done, pilot. Scan complete.
That's how we ended up back here. I don't know whether that was kind of cringe or not. That's a concept that I've had sort of floating around in my head for a number of years, this conversation between two brothers or two versions of someone's self. And that's really what we're going to be kind of hammering out a little bit more today. So for today's show, I want you to think of the sort of paradigm of the left and the right, the left and the right. And when we usually talk about like the left wing or the right wing, people think of that in terms of policy. They think, you know, the left wing wants abortion, welfare, all these social services, and they think of all these sort of policy issues, open borders. And the right wants, well, not those things. You know, the right wants like lower taxes, and the right wants to be more self-sufficient and more pro-family. I want us to kind of ignore that way of thinking of the left and the right for a little while, because those do shift so much. What was considered left and right 5-10 years ago, like I've got this thing now where people think it's really out there that I still agree with the like traditional definition of marriage, that it being between one man and one woman. They think that that's like crazy or out there, and even they'll say that that's hateful, that makes me a bad person to believe that. And now I'm just starting to tell them, it's like, no, well, what I'm doing, just if it's that hard for you to believe, just imagine that I'm doing performance art from 12 years ago. And I'm just like, this is what you and Obama believed. This is just a character of what you and Obama's beliefs were 12 years ago. You know, like the things shift so much, so rapidly now. Probably has something to do with internet communication, but what is left and what is right? Let's try and abandon how we've been thinking of left and right in terms of policy. And let's instead think of it as a kind of predisposition that people err towards. They err in one direction more than another. They prioritize one thing more than another. And even if a person is totally balanced, if the timeline is long enough, they end up kind of trending towards one type of thinking. We're not talking about policies, we're talking about a type of thinking and priorities. And I think that a really good example of this is the prodigal son, that story, the parable of the lost son. And most people only read the first half of that story. Like when people think of that old parable, that old story, they have this sort of shortened version of it. And the fact that we see this sort of shortened version of it, I think is why it's sort of evidence of the condition that we're in. So let's go over that really quick. Yeah, Begone Thought says trad conservative values are now ultra far right. There was a man who had 2 sons. The younger one said to his father, "Father, give me my share of the estate." So he divided his property between them. Now, he's effectively saying to his father, like, let's behave as though you were already dead. Like, give me my inheritance before you've died, because he's not happy with where things are in the family. So the father obliges. He says, so he divided the property between them. Not long after that, the younger son got together all he had, set off on a distant country, and there squandered his wealth in wild living. So he like went into the city and blew all of this money, all of his inheritance on whatever, like prostitutes and opulent food, I bet. After he had spent everything, there was a severe famine in the whole country, and he began to be in need. So he went and hired himself out to a citizen of that country, who sent him to his fields to feed pigs. He longed to fill his stomach with the pods that the pigs were eating, so no one gave him anything. He spent the money and he became poor, so he made himself a slave, and he would feed these pigs, and he would just wish that he could eat what the pigs were eating. When he came to his senses, he said, "How many of my father's hired servants have food to spare, and here I am starving to death? I will set out and go back to my father and say to him, 'Father, I have sinned against heaven and against you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. Make me like one of your hired servants.' So he got up and went back to his father. But while he was still a long way off, his father saw him and was filled with compassion for him. He ran to his son, threw his arms around him, and kissed him. The son said to him, 'Father, I have sinned against heaven and against you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son.'" I like how the son knows that it's not just his father that he's he's hurt his father's feeling. He's done something wrong. It's no, he's insulted the father and he's insulted heaven itself. It's like he's insulted the sort of divine hierarchy. And at this point, he just wishes that he could even just be a hired servant. But the father said to his servants, quick, bring the best robe and put it on him. Put a ring on his finger and sandals on his feet. Bring the fattened calf and kill it. Let's have a feast and celebrate. For this son of mine was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found. So they began to celebrate. Now, to most people, that's kind of where the story ends. That's kind of it. It's like, there's the one really bad son who gets all the money and he goes and he blows it and falls on hard times, and he comes home and wants to apologize to dad, and dad accepts him. And that's and dad's so loving and he accepts him, and that's the end of the story. They completely forget about the other brother. I think most people who are probably watching this stream, I think most of my audience, if you're like me, you're probably the kind of person who relates more to the older brother. So it says, meanwhile, the older son was in the field. When he came near the house, he heard music and dancing. So he called one of the servants and asked him what was going on. Your brother has come, he replied, and your father has killed the fattened calf because he has him back safe and sound. The older brother became angry and refused to join in. So his father went out and pleaded with him. But he answered his father, look, all these years I've been slaving for you and never disobeyed your orders. Yet you never gave me even a young calf or a young goat so I could celebrate with my friends. But when this son of yours who has squandered your property with prostitutes comes home, you kill the fattened calf for him. My son, the father said, you are always with me and everything I have is yours. But we have to celebrate and be glad, because this brother of yours was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is now found. So again, most people kind of make this whole story about the love between the prodigal son and the father. And the older brother is working through something really serious too. While this whole feast is occurring, he would rather work in the fields. He would rather keep his nose down and just stay with his work because he's so resentful. He's so resentful that he did everything right. He worked really hard and he didn't break the rules. And, the squeaky wheel gets the grease and the other brother comes back and everyone's all happy. And this was the person who betrayed the family. So the person who betrayed the family gets this big celebration, and the guy who played by the rules, in his mind, he's getting completely kind of swept aside. To the father, it's just about having everyone there. And he just wants everyone to be at the feast. It's not the work that he cares about. It's not the mistakes that the prodigal son made that he cares about. It's his children that he cared about. And both of the sons, they both have a different error. They both have a different problem. Well, you could say that one of them is hedonistic and he's just sort of pursuing experience at the expense of the family itself. One is the product of a sort of excess of mercy and lack of rules. The other is an excess of a demand for justice. So he has his own issues, which I was kind of trying to express in that lore video, the conversation between the two versions of myself, my young self and then future self. That's what I was trying to get across there. And if we apply that to political terms, I think it's more useful for us to look at the political spectrum through that lens rather than for us to think of policy. Because I look at it like these are the two different types of people who are smashing into each other in society right now. Okay, let's bring up the whiteboard here. Give me a second to set this up. Also, I don't know if this is one of those linguistic coincidences, but the left and the right, in a lot of old traditions, it's in at least certain Hinduist traditions or whatever, there's the left-hand path and the right-hand path, and they mean very specific things. It's there's a reason that they wipe their butt or whatever. There's the one hand that's unclean and the other hand that they keep clean. I kind of wonder if this is one of those linguistic coincidences. To be right-handed, but also to be right, as in to be correct, to be the one who is right, versus left, the one who has left, or the one who is left, like left behind, who's left. I kind of wonder if there's something to do with that and the origins of our words, the words that we use. Yeah, right is right and left has left. Stream's down. They had to shut us down because we were going Jesus mode. Probably not. It's probably not happened. We're back. Okay, so again, the goal isn't to be some kind of like big brain centrist, okay? I'm going to explain in a little bit why the centrists are wrong. But let's think of history this way. So there's the analogy that like we're trying to head down a road. We have this narrow path that we're going down. We're trying to get to the narrow gate. And throughout history, like in order to stay on that path, sometimes the conditions around us are changing so much that we need to like turn left or right. We need to, in order to follow the road, even if the road is straight, we're the ones who drift. And so we need to correct. There's different cultural, social pressures that are on us that cause us to move in a certain direction, and we need to stay on the road. And that requires having a steering wheel that we can turn in both directions, right? So what we end up seeing is this. Okay, something like that. You could say that this is this sort of timeline of history. You could say that maybe this represents 1,000 years of human history, or you could say that this represents like an hour of your day where you have to make certain decisions, and maybe some of the time you follow the rules maybe more closely than you need to, whereas other times you kind of just like abandon the rules and whatever, go for that extra donut because you feel like it or whatever. You're constantly on some level, you're prioritizing one over the other. And some people, and what happens is people find themselves in different places on this distribution. People kind of find themselves all over the place. And in a way, it's like you could kind of say that that's not their fault. It's not someone's fault for being too much one way or the other. It's just how they are seeing the world. Maybe they need to be corrected sometimes. Maybe sometimes they express an excess of justice and other times they express an excess of mercy. You could say that it's like they're too compassionate, you know. They're compassionate beyond the realms of rationality. They want the borders to be open so that they can give welfare to the whole world. And these guys are saying, who's going to pay for this? Who's going to actually do the work? This doesn't work. This isn't practical. And it's kind of like there's a time and a place for both, but because we each have these different inclinations, the world sort of presents itself a certain way to us. And I'm not sure that a person really chooses it too much. And they both have a point. And even if you're a really balanced person and you understand where both are coming from really well, and you're able to kind of integrate what each of them are trying to do really well, you're still, over time, eventually going to err in the direction of one over the other. It's kind of like that's why we need each other. Like I had this situation once where I was doing some orienteering. I was navigating in the wilderness or whatever, and because I was misreading my bearing, every single time I checked my compass, I was throwing myself out more and more and more until I ended up in the wrong location, because every time I pulled out my compass, I would try and set a new bearing, and I just kept turning further and further and further. Each different type of person, even when they try and be as fair and balanced as possible, they just have a predisposition to want to move the steering wheel in one direction a little bit more than the other over time, just a tiny bit more. You could say that there's a little bit more drag on one side of the steering wheel. So it's always just a little bit, it comes more naturally for them to like uphold the rules, or for them to kind of just like ignore the rules this one time, make that kind of exception. And what we end up with is a situation like this, which is where I believe we are right now. Now what we have is, I want you to imagine this sort of hypothetical situation where people thought that they were going straight. They thought they were headed in the right direction, but it's kind of like humanity made a mistake, or sort of like collective consciousness, whatever you want to call it. We ended up going in one direction when we thought we were going straight. We made this error, and now we're headed here. We think this dotted line, we think that's straight, but it's not. So we're actually headed in this direction. A lot of us would say that, society, culture, we're just drifting further and further left. Now, the radicals on this side, they would say that no, the world it's the other way around, and things are drifting further and further right. There's more and more right-wing extremists. They would try and say that. I think that this is more accurate. Now, the green, what I'm showing here is this would be like the field of vision, the area that you can see. And if you're balanced, if you're in a good state, if you're in the middle, you can see out in both directions. You see out in both directions. You can take into account all the different perspectives. But once you start to turn and drift, these people end up in the shadows. Okay? Even if this guy's pretty close to the narrow road or whatever you want to call it. And he's now out of the game. He's out of the Overton window. He doesn't get to be a part of this society because they put him in the shadows, because they think that this is the right direction, but they're just drifting, they're just turning. And what happens is the dirty centrists, they think that they're just going along here. What they're doing is they just don't want to turn the steering wheel at all. They don't want the wheel to move. They don't want the steering wheel to turn in any direction. They're just constantly trying to uphold the status quo. They're saying that, oh, well, because, there's this side and there's this side, and let's just find the happy medium between the two. So they just keep going in the direction that we're already going in, but sometimes you're going in the wrong direction. Sometimes you need to course correct. You need to come back. And the real risk is that you need to be able to come back in a way where you don't do this. Where you don't just completely overcorrect. You have to be able to get back onto the road and straighten out. But people who are like in love with either the right or the left, it's like they think that because they're right wing, that makes them the one who are doing the right thing. When that's not what it's about. It's not about working in the field and being the best worker in the field. It's about being at the feast with the family. So they need to be able to correct. And a lot of times they don't. Okay, let me see where I'm at with my notes. All right, comparative left and right. So here's another idea. Now, in a way, it's like it's comparative. So if the right is a positive and the left is a negative, anything on this side should be positive. But once you start to drift, anyone who's here they get considered positive. They get considered right, but they're actually not. They're left. They're left. And this is what we're seeing with all the like conservative Inc. movements and all these groups that come into the church, and they're actually social justice warriors, and they're pretending to be something they're not. They would say that, oh, well, I'm right wing. Well, you're right wing compared to radical leftists, but you're not actually right wing. You got to actually get over onto this side, as if the goal is to be right wing or left wing. It shouldn't be, right? But they're misidentifying themselves because of how far things have drifted. Ashton says, I'm a little behind, but that's a beautiful story. It is a good story. So let's talk a little bit about like what each group needs to hear. This would be my correction for the right wing. This is like my correction for myself, because I know that I have a predisposition to fall on that side of things more often than the other. It's easier for me to want to follow the rules and want things to like be fair in that regard. Justice comes easier to me than mercy, is what it is. And somewhere along the way, I recognized that I needed to care more about Okay. Like I've reached a point in my life where on multiple occasions, people would want to give me promotions for different things and I would turn them down because it wouldn't be worth the hassle. And you have some people who they kind of like understand how the world works on an objective level. It's like there are objective things in the world and there are subjective things in the world. People who understand things on a sort of subjective level, they can kind of understand like people's feelings a little bit better, or they kind of accommodate those things more. They navigate that sort of shifting world a little bit more. So for the people who understand the objective world, it's a little bit easier for them to be like managers of things or whatever, because at the end of the day, it's like they'll show up on time. They'll know that there's some sort of deadline or there's some sort of goal or there's these rules. They know what's expected of them and they'll run with that. They'll uphold that. It's like personally important for them. Part of their identity is in some way matched in there. So I start to recognize that I kind of fell into that category, and I actually made this YouTube channel. I started doing these videos because it was this realization that I could go two different ways in my life. I could become some sort of like successful person. I could become some sort of successful person, or I could build some kind of online community and have conversations with people. And it's like, I knew that I was so far, not that I was so far, but I knew that I had a tendency to be on this side of things. And in order for me to stay on the road, I needed to like create a community. I needed to create some kind of place where I would talk with people and navigate some of these ideas. Because otherwise I was going to just get trapped here. And this was my way of turning the steering wheel, was to be a part of this community. To get involved in these online discussions. And the problem that the right side has is there's the idea that like if you do all these things and don't have love, you're a resounding gong. Like even if you're helping other people, even if you're doing everything right, even if you're working in the field and you're, contributing to the family, you're paying all the taxes, you're working so hard, society is afloat because it's on you and people like you's shoulders, and you've decided you're not going to shrug yet. But if you're doing those things without love, it doesn't mean anything. We're supposed to be at the feast. That's more important than anything. So for those of us who are further on the right, if we do kind of understand the natural world a little bit easier, or the objective world a little bit more easier, what we have to consider is that some people are on this side, not necessarily because of choice. And we would tell them over and over to, what's that old adage? It's like, pick yourself up by your bootstraps or whatever. We just think that they need to try harder. Some people are broken. Like some people are so broken, it doesn't matter how hard they try. And that doesn't mean that they can't get better. That doesn't mean that things aren't going to improve, but you can't shame them into overcoming the things that they are facing. Whereas you might respond to a certain level of shame. You might have a kind of self-respect where it's just kind of a matter of motivation. That might not be the case for them. They might be falling into the things that they're falling into. They might have these needs, that this kind of like unquenchable thirst that turns them into these hedonists, that causes them to prioritize the acceptance of other people more than what's right. They have like, it's coming from weakness. There's something that's broken. And that doesn't mean don't call them out, but it does mean you have to appeal to like mercy and compassion. Yeah, they're going to like try and manipulate it. They're going to try and use that as a kind of currency, or they're going to try and weaponize that against you. But you can't let yourself become resentful. You can't let yourself become bitter. The idea that like, well, facts don't care about your feelings. So the right has sort of overcorrected and said, okay, we don't care about your feelings at all now. And we're going to we're going to make fun of you and we're going to laugh at your expense and you're the butt of the joke. And then you end up with like the cringe boomers, myself included. We need to be able to correct them and express what is right while still caring about their feelings, because that's the only way that we're going to get through to anyone. The second that we don't actually care about how they feel, it doesn't matter whether or not we're right. We can be right all day long. Trump can win the election and they'll cheat and no one will care. No one will care. Whatever the rules are, no one will care. You have to be able to like uphold the rules while still caring about how they're doing on that subjective level, because they don't have control of it. And they need your like excess of control in order to balance them out and stabilize them. That's why they're where they are. That's not why they're where they are. That's not true. They're there because I don't know. I'm not going to go down that road too far, but whoever's fault it is that they've ended up in the position that they're in, whoever's fault it is, I don't care. They need you to be able to like provide the solutions in a way where you still care. And if you don't care, it's not helping. So also a kind of correction that the right needs to make in order to not drift in this direction is there are so many times where God reprimands people by telling them, you screwed up, you like fell into temptation, or you did something wrong because you weren't asking me. You weren't asking me for what you needed or for what you wanted. With the story of the prodigal son and the older brother, the father says to him, because the older brother is upset that, there was this party and the fattened calf was killed. And he's like, you never did that for me and my friends. And the father's like, everything that I have is yours. Like, all you need to do is ask. So the right will take for granted our self-reliance, and will stop being dependent on it's good to be dependent on the Lord. It's good to be a squeaky wheel and ask him, and like to knock and keep stating your case before God. And at a certain point, we become so self-reliant that it's like we respect God. We respect him and we want to follow the rules and we want to do what he says because we don't want to be on his bad side. But we don't ever like come to him as a child and ask him for things. And we need to, like, we're losing everything. We're going to lose everything unless we start to ask. Well, maybe even if we ask, I guess we'll see what God decides, right? But we need to ask. We need to plead for these things. It's not right that like what generations of our families have built is just being completely pissed away. And maybe we've forgotten how to ask how these things are protected. Over generations, we're not doing that. I don't know. But like, let's be a squeaky wheel here. You risk taking for granted your stability and your relationship with the Father. You know you're right, so you're not hungry and you're not desperate enough. Yeah, it's like a person can kind of make an idol of stability. They over-prioritize stability and that self-reliance. And sometimes you have to put that at risk in order to be obedient. Specialist of Need says, I need this stream after the degeneracy I just witnessed on Ellen Page's Twitter timeline. Yeah, there's a shame, hey? I don't know what specifically you're referencing, but Ellen Page has gone out to lunch. Okay, now let's talk about the left-hand brother, the prodigal brother. Here's what this person needs to hear. And maybe I'm not the right guy. Maybe I'm not the best person to express this message. Maybe I'm too far over here. Maybe this is only going to work if they're hearing it from here. I don't know. Maybe if there's like more left-minded people, members of my audience who are more on this side of things, maybe you guys need to be the ones who are saying these things and upholding these values. Because someone like me, no one's going to want to hear it from. So the person on the left hand, the prodigal brother, here's your problem, is you're wrong and you don't care. Like you're wrong, you're out to lunch, you're lying and you know it. You know it and you don't even care. You think it's all right. That's your problem. Everything you do is wrong. It's just, it's like, that's the direction that you're trending towards. You don't think that these things matter. You don't think it's serious when people like cheat and lie and are dishonest. And you head down that road so much that you don't even realize when you are doing that. It's like you numb yourself to that concept entirely until maybe there once was a time where you knew that you were lying. You knew you were being dishonest, but you gave that up so long ago that you can't even tell anymore. And so these guys have to come in and they're doing everything that they can to try and like fix the problem. And you're just accusing them of being hateful. You'll hide behind love and compassion. You'll weaponize those terms and say that anyone who's got a solution to a problem, well, they're just being unloving. That's what you'll try and say. You know, let's all just hand all of our rights over to the government because it would be unloving to like actually congregate and be obedient to the Lord. For us to actually be able to like choose for ourselves who we associate with, oh, that's unloving. And it's more loving to be slaves of everyone else's hypervigilance and oversensitivity, their microaggressions or whatever. You act like anyone who corrects you hates you, but they're correcting you because they love you. Sometimes they're not. Sometimes they do make that error where they abandon love and they're just trying to be right for the sake of being right. But even when they're loving and even when it's coming from the right place, when you're in error, you accuse them of being this piece of crap. And then you try and build that into the law and you just persecute people for being right. You make it illegal to say that 2 + 2 is 4 because whatever, that hurts someone's feelings. You end up at this point where this guy actually loves you. He's trying to fix things for everyone. And you're accusing him of being hateful. You're the one who's disparaging him because you're so stubborn. You don't actually want to conceive of the fact that you could be wrong. And it's an insecurity. It's an insecurity. It's like, because you know that you're so fragile, you know that you're so unstable that like you live a lot of your life seeing people around you who have it more together than you. And so you resent them and you're so sick of being wrong that you no longer can even approach the idea that you're wrong. You were wrong one too many times. And so instead of being able to correct from here out, you just say that, you know what? No, I'm just going to double down forever. And you develop certain skills along the way. It's like, because you can navigate that sort of subjective, intangible world of people's feelings and the sort of like changing, shifting tides or whatever. Maybe you're very socially astute. Someone like, you know, a lot of us, we joke that we're basically like autistic. Like we basically don't have, I'm not trying to be disparaged towards autistic people, but it's like we basically just see things as systems and patterns, and we don't really know how to communicate those things to people. And when we try, we just end up kind of coming across like crazy people. Or, you know, what I get a lot of is I get told that I think too much. Not that I'm wrong. It's just that I think too much about these things. And I'm like, I wish people thought more. I wish that the majority of public life wasn't this like really superficial, shallow level of thought, you know. But we all like, you know, we all have our strengths, and that's part of my fault, is that I should be able to make things simple. I should be able to make a stream like this and for it to be 10 minutes and not an hour and a half of me rambling and drawing pictures. You know, Christ was able to do it with the parable of the prodigal son. Took him 1/10 of the time. So the left-wing people, they end up with these certain social skills. They maybe learn how to manipulate, because you're always in this world of fun and party and you're never like working on the field. You get along with everyone. You get along with everyone, and it's like everyone shields from you the truth because they know you can't take it. You're not a serious person. You live in this world where everyone gets along, and that's not the way that it is. And it's because you're not equipped to be able to actually have disagreements. And eventually it's like, you don't even think that there's another side anymore. And that's how you think you're here, but you're off drifting. You can't see how things are even bad at all. You look at all the lessons of history, you look at everything that humanity has done in the past, and you think that that couldn't happen now. You think that we're better than that. You think that we're better than like Genghis Khan, whatever, like having bags and bags of human ears and like salting fields just so that people will starve. You think that that's not still a part of the human condition, that humans wouldn't do that. You think that we're somehow more compassionate than we were 1,000 years ago, instead of thinking that, well, no, we've had 1,000 more years to sharpen our weapons. We have 1,000 more years to learn how to hold on to plausible deniability to actually starve people. Like, you can't even conceptualize these things. You don't care because you care more about not looking stupid, because you've been so stupid it makes you insecure. And you need to listen. You need to listen. You need to turn around. You need to repent. You need to like listen to other people and fix these things. And that's going to take some, I guess, humility. Because you're not strong. You're not. We know it. And that's not me trying to rub it in people's faces. But like, we don't judge you. We don't judge you for the situation that you're in. We just want you to understand that this situation is occurring, and like, we need to come out of it. We need to come out of it because it's going to destroy everyone. We're going to burn down the ship that we're all on. Other people will want to help other people will be there to help if you don't persecute them. Even if you persecute them, there's going to be people who are still going to try and get through to you. But what, now you can't even go to a church. The state won't even let you have these conversations, or they'll give you a ticket. You'll be personally liable for thousands of dollars. Thanks. Oh my goodness, Ellen Page is now trans. Ellen just switched over to he. Elliot, are you joking? Are you serious? Bob says, if compassion is an innate trait, it has been diluted to hell and back, like most of our innate senses. Yes, both of these, you could say compassion and justice. Well, both of these twist them because they have more of a focus on compassion. They actually can idolize it, and they can twist it, and they can use compassion as a weapon, and they turn it into something evil. So even though it's like they prioritize compassion, they may be the least equipped to actually be compassionate. And the same thing with the right. If they care about the rules and fairness and principles and justice, it's like, yeah, well, they end up then creating these impossible rules that no one can follow. Man exists for the Sabbath rather than the Sabbath existing for man. And, like the law was given to humanity in the Old Testament to show humanity that they are incapable of following it. That's the purpose of the law. The purpose of the law is to show people that they're broken, that they can't follow it, and that they need help. So the right, because they will misunderstand that, and they'll think that, oh, well, it's about the law. It's about working in the field. I care about that more than even my family or whatever, right? They end up like taking the laws and weaponizing them too. And they'll persecute people who just they'll persecute people who aren't as strong, but sometimes there are people who are way stronger than them, and they'll persecute them just because they have the advantage. Hey, Hank says, great stream today. I wasn't sure if this was going to land or not. This is like some kind of Bible study philosophy stream today. It's a little bit easier when I just have jokes to tell you guys that everyone's going to like. I don't know, stuff like this. I think this is important. And I think understanding some of these ideas is what's going to help us fix problems more than, it's going to restore the social fabric more than just like us arguing about abortion further and being like, well, have you considered that they're actually a person? It's not her body. It's like, I don't know. There's a reason people are seeing things the way that they are. See you guys later. Stay in the schmood. Peace out. He's talking to you, Tim Pool. Yeah, man. The dirty centrists. Ashton says, almost just died in traffic listening to this. I hope you're okay. FedEx truck stopped right in front of me. Yikes. Yeah, don't be too distracted. I know that I'm like so alluring. It's like you're not just watching a show. I put you in a trance, you know, with the sound of my voice. If you're driving, keep your eyes on the road. I know that what I'm doing is so visually appealing with my background.